Microsoft Flight Simulator continues with its local legend series. This time it's number 6, it's the Junkers F13. And from the get-go, let me tell you, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. It's worth a look. Comes in 4 different variants, and today we're in the replica. It's a modernized version with updated navigation. Great to see you back at the Sim Hangar. My name's Mark, thanks for watching and let's get started. Now I know I'm a little late to the party. This aircraft's been out for a couple of days now and there's quite a lot of reviews already. But not all of those have done this aircraft justice. And it features a number of touches that I really like that we haven't seen much of so far in the local Legend series. The F13, which first took to the air in 1919, was revolutionary for its day. The first all-metal body with aluminium alloy ribbing, providing both strength and durability. Had a fixed pitch prop, and the one we're taking for a spin has an updated Pratt & Whitney rotary engine. Pilot and co-pilot, an open cockpit, but you did get the luxury of a windscreen, room for a bit of luggage, and 4 passengers. Welcome to the height of comfort in the 1920s. Please take your seats, fasten your seatbelts, we'll be departing shortly. The quality of the texturing etc. is the same as the Junkers Ju-52. I love it. A short hop today from Cologne in Germany to Dusseldorf, about 36 nautical miles. I'm using live weather. Before we get going, let me show you something. First of all, let's just put on that master battery. There it is, it's on, and close it to guard it. And let's now go and have a look at the EFI, or electronic flight instrument. Let's power it on. Once powered on, hit the mode button. And here you get a whole lot of options. You can enable or disable the chocks and tie downs. There we are, aircraft is now secured. As it's an open cockpit, you also get the cockpit cover. You'll need that if it rains. Some heavy duty tarpaulin in place there. As we'll be departing shortly, we'll just get rid of all those. And below that you'll see there's inbuilt emergency checklists. You can click on one of these and then drill down into the detail by using the left and right arrows. System failures, however, are the default sim failure settings. On the EFI there are also some simplified ground services. We can open the doors, we can get some stairs in place. We're now ready to receive our passengers. Before we bring our passengers on board, we can set our refueling. When you initially start up, well, fuel is normally at 50% in all tanks, as shown here. I'm going to change it and make it 0 fuel and see if we can do it through the EFI. Using the LSK button on the right hand side. My mouse interaction, by the way, is on legacy mode. I can change that, and I think for today, well, we'll go for 3/4 fuel. Now I'll hit the request button. Now our fuel bowser has magically arrived and they've started adding the fuel. You gotta enjoy the little hand pump on the side of the bowser. This was all manual work, of course. Let's go back to our cockpit and let's just check if our fuel quantity has changed. And yes, it has. We now have 75% in both tanks. Let's now add some passengers. I think we'll add 3 passengers today. For the front seat, left and right, and for the rear seat, just on the right. And we'll also add some baggage. The amount of baggage you apply affects the amount of luggage visible. That's done. I'll now select boarding and I'll select load. And let's pop outside again. The trolley cart is visible, and after a very brief period, you'll see the luggage loaded. Except for the small red bag floating in the air. Obviously they didn't fancy that one. It's not GSX, but I love the attention to detail. To get rid of the luggage cart, just hit no request. Under boarding, our passengers are now on board, so we can remove the stairs and we can close the door. I think there's a bug in the system. I have got no idea how to get rid of the fuel bowser until the engine starts. If you know, let me know in the comments below. Let's get things started. First of all, I'll just hide the yoke. Parking brake is on. We'll now put on our beacon light, which is on the top panel, and it's our only external light, by the way. So don't get caught flying this at night, you'll be in trouble. Next, make sure fuel is on the fullest tank. In this case they're both the same, so I've got it on both. We can see here is also a carburetor heat. That should be pulled all the way down for startup. That's for de-icing. And our oil cooler flap should be all the way up or cool for start. Unless you're just doing a quick turnaround. Mixture to full and throttle forward about 1 centimeter or so. That's our fuel pressure gauge. We can put on left and right hand fuel pumps now. I can't hear them, but I can see pressure build up on the gauge. We'll prime the engine quickly, that's on the co-pilot side, and we just turn it to the left a couple of times. I think 3 will do for today. It's fairly warm. Back to our top panel and both mags can go on. We're just about ready. Lift the guard on the starter switch. Have a quick check around, make sure that the prop is clear. Looks okay to me. And flick the switch up to start. I love the sounds on this aircraft. There goes the fuel bowser. And now we just want to adjust the RPM to around about 900 to 1000 to let the engine and oil warm up. Just inching the throttle forward just a bit. Alternator can now come on and we can turn on both our avionics and our gyro. Gyro will enable our steam gauges and the avionics switch our instruments such as the EFI. Power that on, hit the mode switch to bring up our horizon. There is a Garmin unit so you can track a flight plan, but there's no autopilot in this aircraft. That's our route today from Cologne to Dusseldorf. Echo Delta Delta Kilo to Echo Delta Delta Lima. Of course this aircraft is VFR only, but will help substantially with our navigation today. In the retro version you also have comms, and above that you have your transponder. We'll just turn that on, and I think we'll set it for VFR 1200, and we will set it to Alt as we'll be departing shortly. Between the pilot and co-pilot seat is the wheel lock for the tail wheel, which you'd use for initial takeoff and landings. Unlock obviously for taxi. In the center is your elevator or pitch trim, and there's also a visual indicator on the front panel. I recommend a touch of trim down for departure. We're ready to go. We're going to taxi to the runway, handbrake off, and advance the throttle slightly. Go easy on the throttle. She taxis very easily and very quickly. To steer you'll need a combination of rudder as well as differential brakes. For any tight turn make sure you're going slowly, and you definitely have to use your left or right brakes. This aircraft of course doesn't have any flaps. We're just going to backtrack runway 32 left and we'll be ready for takeoff. In the 1920s we didn't worry about incidentals such as landing lights. This doesn't have any. We're ready for departure. Now just lock the tail wheel, parking brake is off, and slowly advance the throttle. Just make sure you're well lined up before locking the tail wheel, as the rudder only becomes effective once some speed's been gained. Tail's up already at 40 knots and we're airborne at 48 knots. Just like the Junkers Ju-52 with its massive wings, the F-13's no different and gets in the air very quickly. It's very floaty. She can have a tendency to stick her nose in the air, so keep your eye on this speed. You want to climb between 75 and 80 knots if you can. Fix gear so we don't have to worry about that, and I've now tapped off a bit on the throttle to bring the RPM out of the yellow zone. And you'll find it's a bit of a dance and balancing act between the throttle and the mixture to get it just right. We climb to a cruise of 2,500 feet. We'll be flying over Cologne, Leverkusen, and then we'll be on our way to Dusseldorf. Gentle with the trim and you'll find it's fairly easy to keep her stable in the air. Just passing 1,600 feet and speed just over 80 knots, climbing about 500 feet per minute. Once I get to cruise I'll be tapping back and looking for an RPM of around about 1,600. Just closing the oil cooler flaps about 75%. I need to keep the oil warm. The wonderful city of Cologne dead ahead, and the River Rhine twists and turns its way through the city. In the real world I've visited Cologne many times, mainly for various exhibitions. It's a beautiful city with lots of friendly people. If you're ever thinking of a destination, well, Cologne should be on your list. Just make sure you take your hangover cure with you. Those large buildings down on your right hand side are the Cologne Messe, where all the exhibitions are held, and across the bridge, you can just make it out in the haze, is Cologne Cathedral, commonly called the Dom, Gothic church of epic proportions. We're now at cruise and there's not lots to do. Keep an eye on your fuel and oil pressure and your temperatures. Small adjustments of the mixture and the throttle will keep you steady. You'll find the F13 fairly easy to fly. She's a little sluggish at times to react to handling, but with such big wings and an aircraft of this era, that's exactly what you'd expect. Also, plan your descent early. She's slow to lose speed and even slower to drop in altitude. But get too slow and you'll lose control authority. We've tapped off on the throttle and we've started our descent. All cooler flaps fully open, as it's still fairly warm. So I haven't used the carburetor heat as there's no threat of icing. Carburetor heat feeds warm air into the carburetors and prevents the valves from sticking. Dusseldorf International is there at our 11 o'clock. I'm effectively on base and we're landing runway 23 left. We'll be on final shortly, so let's communicate with our passengers and tell them to put their seatbelts on. Oi, put your seatbelts on, alright? Right, thank you. Passengers advised. Altitude just dropping below 1500 feet, speed around 90 knots, and now turning on final. Dusseldorf, warm up the coffees, we're coming in. Now on short final, speed about 75 knots. Throttle just about at idle. I was a little high on initial approach, but used some side slipping and she lost altitude quickly. Little bit of a crosswind here for the final landing. Speed 70 knots. Aiming for 60 knots as I cross the runway. Then power all the way back, keep the nose up and let her float down. "50 knots and still floating. Come on, get down." We'll lock now off so I can steer, and we'll take the first exit ramp to our left that we come to. We're down safe and sound. Well, as you've probably gathered by now, I really like the Junkers F13. And for the price, it's a bargain. But it's not without its faults, and hopefully the developer will tackle some of the issues. When you loaded up some of the fuel, occasionally, well, it would revert back to zero in the tanks. And when you shut down, you'd still get the prop moving slightly. And just like the Junkers 52 originally, it's a shame you can't open the doors manually. This should be included. But for $15 US, well, I think it's a bargain. It does have circuit breakers and they're all functioning. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found this useful and informative. Stay well, look after yourselves, I'll see you again soon. And bye for now.